When my sister told me to leave the house, I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask her to give me more time. I simply stood there, holding my bag, and I smiled. Not because I was brave, and not because I was strong. I smiled because something inside me had already gone quiet, like a candle that burns out without smoke. The house still smelled like my parents'. My mother's curtains were still hanging by the window, a little faded from the sun. My father's shoes were still placed neatly near the door, exactly where he always left them. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt like home anymore. My sister stood in front of me with her arms crossed, her face calm, almost bored, as if she were asking a stranger to leave, not her own sister. "You have until tonight," she said in a flat voice. "This house belongs to me now." I nodded slowly. I did not argue. I did not ask why. I picked up my bag, walked past her, and stepped outside. She did not follow me. She did not say goodbye. The door closed behind me with a soft sound, but inside my chest something closed much harder. What my sister did not know, and what I did not fully understand at that moment, was that this was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. My name is Grace. I am the younger daughter, the quieter one, the one people often forget is in the room. Growing up, everyone noticed my sister first. Her name is Elaine, and she always had a way of filling every space with her presence. She spoke loudly, laughed loudly, and lived loudly. I learned very early that if I wanted peace, I had to stay silent. Our childhood home was not large, but it was warm. It had a small porch where my mother liked to sit in the evenings, and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee in the morning. My mother believed the kitchen was the heart of the home. She said as long as the kitchen was full of warmth, the family would stay together. My father worked long hours and did not speak much, but when he looked at you, you felt protected, like nothing bad could reach you. Elaine and I were very different. She needed attention like air. I needed quiet like shelter. When something went wrong, it was easier to blame me because I never fought back. If a glass broke or someone forgot to lock the door, my name came up first. I learned not to defend myself, not because I agreed, but because silence felt safer than conflict. At dinner, Elaine talked and everyone listened. I passed the salt, refilled glasses, and smiled when spoken to. Sometimes my mother would reach for my hand under the table, squeezing it gently, as if she knew I was fading into the background. But she never said anything out loud, and I never asked her to. As the years passed, Elaine moved out as soon as she could. She wanted the city, the lights, the fast life. I stayed behind. I stayed because my parents needed help, and because the house still felt like home to me. I helped with bills, with doctor visits, and with grocery shopping. I learned which medicines my father needed in the morning and which ones he took at night. When his hands started shaking, I held his cup so he would not spill. When my mother forgot small things, I reminded her gently, pretending it was no big deal. The first call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Elaine's name appeared on my phone, and my heart tightened before I even answered. She told me Dad was in the hospital and that I should get there quickly. I was already putting on my shoes. At the hospital, the lights were too bright, and the hallways smelled like cleaning liquid and fear. My father looked smaller in that bed, weaker than I had ever seen him. When he smiled at me and called me kid, I had to turn away so he would not see the tears in my eyes. He passed away 2 weeks later. Just like that, the man who had always made me feel safe was gone. My mother never recovered from that loss. She tried, but grief has a way of settling deep inside people. She stopped cooking, stopped gardening, and spent long hours staring at the television without really watching it. I moved into her room so I could hear her breathing at night, just to make sure she was still there. Elaine came for the funeral. She cried loudly, accepted hugs, and spoke about how much she loved Dad. Afterward, she told me she would take care of all the legal matters. I trusted her without question. She was my sister. I believed blood meant safety. That was my mistake. Months later, my mother fell sick. This time it happened quickly. On her last night, she held my hand and whispered my name. She told me to be strong. I wanted to tell her I was tired of always being strong, tired of always holding everything together, but I did not want to worry her. I simply nodded. She passed before sunrise, leaving me alone in a house full of memories. 2 days after the funeral, Elaine called and said we needed to meet at the house. When I arrived, the air felt cold, even though the heater was on. She was sitting at the dining table with several folders spread out in front of her. A man in a suit stood nearby. She introduced him as her lawyer. Without looking at me, she said our parents had left everything to her: the house, the money, the investments. $28 million. The words felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I told her that could not be right, that I had lived there and taken care of our parents. She shrugged and said it did not matter. Then she told me I had to move out, that the house was hers now. That was the moment something inside me cracked, and something else quietly began to grow. I packed my bag slowly, touching the walls and door frames one last time, holding on to memories I could not carry with me. As I stepped outside, she told me not to make things difficult. I turned around, smiled, and said I wouldn't. But deep inside, I knew this story was far from over. The first few weeks after leaving my parents' house were the hardest. I stayed in a small apartment across town, a place that felt empty and temporary. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost, and I could not shake the feeling that my sister had taken not only our parents' fortune, but also the life I had been living, the memories I had been holding together. I tried to distract myself with work, cooking, cleaning, anything that kept my hands busy, but the silence at night was deafening. I could hear my own thoughts and fears in the quiet, and they whispered questions I could not answer. Elaine visited occasionally, but her visits were short, controlled, and always about the business of money. She would smile, but it never reached her eyes. "Grace," she said one afternoon, "I've been thinking. You should start fresh, find a new job, maybe even move. This will be easier for both of us if you accept it." I nodded politely, but my stomach twisted. It felt like she was speaking about a stranger, not her sister, not the person who had shared my entire life. One evening, I found a letter slipped under my apartment door. The handwriting was unfamiliar. I opened it carefully. It was from a lawyer I had never met, someone claiming they represented my parents' estate. They wrote that certain documents had not been fully processed, that some parts of the will were under question. My heart raced. Could there be a way to reclaim what was rightfully mine? Or was it a trap, a way to bring more trouble? I folded the letter slowly and stared at the floor. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I tried reaching out to Elaine, sending polite emails and messages. None were returned. I tried calling her once, but she did not pick up. When I finally got through, her tone was cold. "Grace, I don't have time for this," she said sharply. "Everything has been settled legally. Stop contacting me." I hung up before tears could fall, but the fire inside me had started to burn quietly. I could feel it even in the pit of my stomach. Days turned into weeks, and the letters kept coming. Some were from banks, some from lawyers, some from companies I didn't recognize. They all hinted at irregularities, things that Elaine had overlooked, things that were not entirely legal. But every time I tried to act, I was blocked, told it was already settled. I began to feel trapped, like a small bird fluttering against invisible bars. The tension inside me grew with every phone call, every unopened email. I started to keep a journal, writing down dates, times, and every interaction. It felt like I was preparing for a battle I was not yet ready to fight. And yet, part of me wanted to give up. It seemed easier to let go, to walk away and accept that my life had been stolen. But every memory of my parents, every quiet night spent caring for them, told me I could not. One rainy evening, I decided to visit the old house to see it one last time. The streets were slick with water, and the headlights of passing cars made the wet pavement shimmer. When I arrived, I saw Elaine's car parked outside. I hesitated, my heart pounding. The door opened and she stepped out. She looked exactly the same, poised, controlled, untouchable. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "Grace," she said, as if she had just invited me in for tea, "what are you doing here?" I tried to speak calmly, to explain, but she interrupted me before I could say anything. "I hope you understand. This house is no longer yours. You have to respect that." I left without saying a word. The rain drenched me, but I barely noticed. Every step I took back to my apartment, I felt my resolve hardening. I knew there was more going on than she wanted anyone to see. I knew something in her greed or arrogance could be challenged somehow, but I also knew I needed help. A week later, I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Margaret, a woman with calm eyes and a quiet confidence. She listened to my story without interruption. She read every letter I had saved, every note from the estate. After hours of discussion, she looked at me and said, "Grace, you may have been overlooked, but that does not mean you are powerless. Sometimes the smallest question can change everything." Her words were gentle, but inside me they felt like a spark. From that moment, everything changed. I began preparing. I learned about legal documents, estate laws, and the small mistakes people make when they think they are untouchable. Every call I received from Elaine's lawyer, every email, I documented carefully. Every detail mattered. Every minor misstep could be the key. The more I discovered, the more I realized that Elaine had not only taken the house, but had ignored some crucial aspects of the will, things my parents had wanted carefully noted. I could feel her confidence slipping, even though she pretended it was all under control. It was quiet, almost invisible, but it was there, like a shadow stretching across the floor. And I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months: control. Quiet, steady, growing control. I started visiting the old house indirectly, speaking to neighbors, seeing who had been in touch with my sister, gathering pieces of information that seemed small but could matter later. I was cautious. I was patient. I could feel the tide turning, even though nothing was visible yet. Elaine's power over me felt absolute, but deep down, I knew every empire built on arrogance has a weakness. Then came the first confrontation. I received a letter that changed everything. It was not a threat. It was a question. One small question that made my sister's lawyer call me immediately. One simple inquiry about a signature, a date, a note in the will that no one had thought to check. My heart raced. I realized that the moment I had been waiting for was finally here. The small cracks in Elaine's control were appearing, and I had the key to open them. It was at that moment I understood that patience, careful observation, and faith in truth could be stronger than money, louder than arrogance, and more lasting than any temporary control my sister had over me. The battle was not over, but I felt ready. The rising conflict had pushed me to the edge, but instead of fear, I felt purpose, and I knew, somewhere deep inside, that the quiet sister, the invisible one, might soon be the one with the last word. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The sky was gray and the streets were wet from the previous night's rain. I had just finished breakfast, sipping my coffee slowly, trying to prepare myself for the day ahead. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. "Grace," a calm, professional voice said,
"This is Margaret. I need to speak with you about the will. There has been a development." My heart skipped a beat. I motioned for her to continue, my hands shaking slightly. She explained that while reviewing the final documents, she had discovered something Elaine had overlooked, or perhaps deliberately ignored. There was a small clause, almost invisible in the thick stack of pages, that named me as a secondary beneficiary for part of the estate. Not the house, not the entire fortune, but a substantial portion, enough that my parents clearly intended for me to have it. I didn't speak. I just listened, my stomach twisted with a strange mix of relief and disbelief. I thought of Elaine, smug and untouchable, and I realized how carefully she had assumed she was untouchable. That assumption was about to unravel. Margaret told me that if we acted carefully, we could challenge the handling of the will. We could bring the issue before a court, and if the lawyer asked the right questions, the truth could come out. I hung up the phone and stared out the window, the rain still falling in soft streams. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of hope and determination. I decided to go back to the house, not to confront Elaine directly, but to see the space that had once been my world, now hers. Walking up the familiar driveway, I felt a strange mixture of anger and nostalgia. Every corner held a memory. The porch where I had sat with my mother on summer evenings, the kitchen where my father taught me how to cook scrambled eggs, the living room where Elaine and I had once fought over the TV remote. Elaine was there, of course, as if she had been waiting for me. She looked at me, her smile polite but guarded. "Grace," she said, "I wasn't expecting you." I returned her gaze steadily, my heart pounding quietly in my chest. "I'm not here to fight," I said. I need to understand." She raised an eyebrow. "Understand what?" I took a deep breath and showed her the letter from the lawyer. She glanced at it, her eyes flickering briefly. For the first time, I saw hesitation, a pause, something fragile breaking in her carefully controlled demeanor. This doesn't matter," she said finally, but the voice lacked conviction. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at her, quietly letting her feel the weight of my presence. It was a strange moment, calm and tense at once. She had always believed she could control everything with a word, a gesture, or a look. Now she realized control could be questioned, that the truth had a way of surfacing even when carefully buried. That evening, I received another call from Margaret. "Grace," she said softly, "I think we're ready. One question could change everything. One question, and your sister's entire claim could be challenged." I felt my breath catch. I knew she was right. The turning point was here. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about justice. It was about proving that my parents had intended for me to have a rightful place in their legacy, and that Elaine had tried to erase me from it. The night before the court date, I could not sleep. I sat by my window looking out at the quiet city, remembering my parents, remembering the small life I had built in their home. The anger and fear I had carried for months now transformed into something steadier, resolve. I was no longer invisible. I would not be silent anymore.
The day came quietly, without fanfare. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and faint coffee. Elaine sat across the room, composed as ever, but I could see the tension in her hands, the slight twitch of her jaw. Margaret guided me through each step, and then it happened. The question. A single, simple question about a signature and a note in the will that Elaine had assumed no one would ever notice. The room went silent. The judge looked down at the papers again, and Elaine's lawyer exchanged hurried glances. Elaine's face, for the first time, showed real fear. She opened her mouth, but no words came out immediately. The weight of months of deceit, arrogance, and greed pressed down on her. I sat quietly, feeling an unexpected calm. This was not revenge. This was truth revealing itself, slowly, steadily. My parents had left this life not for greed, not for competition, but for love, and the law now reflected that. The small misstep, the overlooked note, had undone the illusion of absolute control Elaine had built around herself. That moment in the quiet courtroom changed everything. I realized that patience, preparation, and integrity were stronger than anger, louder than entitlement, and more enduring than selfishness. Elaine's power over me, which had seemed insurmountable for months, now felt fragile, almost fleeting. I knew the battle was not over, but the tide had shifted, and for the first time, I felt the weight of possibilities settle comfortably on my shoulders. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt the light of late afternoon on my face. It wasn't a victory yet, not entirely, but it was something I had earned, something no amount of arrogance could take away. The turning point was not just about the will, it was about claiming my own voice, my own life, and my own place in a world that had seemed determined to erase me. And in that quiet moment, I understood something profound. Sometimes the most powerful actions are not loud or dramatic. They are steady, careful, and guided by truth. That realization, calm and unwavering, became my armor. After the court hearing, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The tension that had built over months, the quiet anxiety that had followed me into every room, every phone call, and every letter began to lift, little by little. It was not dramatic. There was no loud celebration, no shouts of victory. There was only the calm knowledge that truth had been acknowledged, that the law had recognized what my parents had truly intended. Elaine avoided my eyes for days after the hearing. She spoke politely, but every word was measured, cautious. I could sense her discomfort, her awareness that she had underestimated the quiet sister she had dismissed for so many years. She no longer seemed untouchable, and I realized I didn't need her to feel small or weak. The law, fairness, and preparation had done that for me. Margaret guided me through the next steps carefully. The estate was partially adjusted, allotting to me the portion that had been my parents' intent from the start. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. It was enough to honor my parents, to restore my place in their legacy, and to show that careful attention to truth can overcome arrogance. I remember sitting at my small apartment table, staring at the legal documents and feeling a quiet warmth in my chest. I had done nothing rash or vengeful. I had simply stood my ground, quietly, patiently, and truth had supported me. In the days that followed, I visited the house once more. This time, I did not go to confront Elaine, nor to demand anything. I went to feel the memories that had lived in those walls for decades. The kitchen smelled faintly of the past, and I traced my fingers along the doorframes where my parents had marked our heights. I walked slowly through the rooms, remembering summers spent reading in the living room, winters where we baked cookies together, and quiet nights where I listened to my mother breathe in the next room. The house had changed hands, but the memories belonged to me forever. Elaine did not come to visit again for weeks. When she did, it was clear that the relationship had shifted. We spoke politely, with no mention of the will or the estate. I realized then that justice did not require me to punish her. Justice was not loud or vengeful. Justice was calm recognition of truth, and in that quiet understanding, I found closure. I began to rebuild my life slowly. I took time to reconnect with old friends, to invest in my passions, and to create spaces that felt safe and mine. Money and property were no longer my central concern. What mattered most was integrity, honesty, and the quiet strength that comes from standing up for yourself without losing your humanity.
I learned to trust myself again and to acknowledge that my parents' love and wisdom had prepared me for these challenges long before I ever understood it. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit in my apartment and think of the journey I had taken, from the silent, overlooked younger sister to the woman who had quietly reclaimed her place. I would remember the fear, the hopelessness, the moments where giving up seemed easier, and I would smile softly, because those moments had shown me how strong I could be when guided by truth and patience. There were still difficult days, memories of betrayal lingered, and I sometimes wondered how things could have been different. But each day I reminded myself that life is not about revenge. Life is about understanding, accepting, and moving forward. I had been pushed out, dismissed, and underestimated, but I had not been destroyed. I had grown stronger, steadier, and more certain of my place in the world.
I also reached out to some family members who had quietly supported me during these months. Their words of encouragement and care reminded me that I was not alone. Even when betrayal had felt absolute, there had been glimmers of hope, small acts of kindness, and quiet understanding. Those were the threads that had held me together, just as my own determination had. By the time the estate was fully adjusted, the tension had faded. I had my portion, and Elaine had hers. We were no longer competitors for attention or validation. We were simply sisters, navigating life after loss, learning to coexist in a way that neither of us could have imagined during the months of conflict. I felt a sense of calm that I had not known in years, a recognition that the hardest moments often teach the most enduring lessons. I learned that strength does not always shout. Sometimes it waits patiently, observes quietly, and acts when the time is right. I discovered that justice is not only about winning, but about truth being seen and recognized. And above all, I understood that life can continue, even after betrayal, grief, and heartache, if you are willing to hold on to integrity and quiet courage. As I walked through the city streets, feeling the soft warmth of the sun on my face, I knew that the worst of the storm had passed. The battles had been fought with patience and care, and the resolution had restored not only what was mine, but also my belief in fairness, perseverance, and the quiet strength within myself. The months after the resolution were quieter than I expected. I no longer felt the heavy weight of injustice pressing down on my chest. Instead, there was a calm that I hadn't known in years. I had my portion of the estate, yes, but more importantly, I had regained something far greater: my voice, my confidence, and the quiet understanding that I could protect what mattered to me without losing myself in anger or resentment. I visited my parents' home one last time, not to claim anything, but to say goodbye. The rooms were filled with memories, laughter, and love. I touched the kitchen counter where my mother had prepared breakfast every morning. I ran my fingers along the doorframe that marked my childhood height. I whispered thank you to the walls, the floors, and the memories that had shaped me. The house no longer belonged to me in legal terms, but the love inside it would always be mine. Elaine and I spoke only occasionally after that. The tension had eased, but the distance remained. I realized that some relationships, once strained by betrayal and greed, can never be fully restored, and that was okay. Closure does not always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means peace within yourself. I had learned to accept that, and it made the quiet moments of my life feel lighter and warmer. I began focusing on myself, my dreams, and my passions. I traveled to places I had once imagined, spent time with friends I had lost touch with, and allowed myself to enjoy the small joys of life. Money and property were no longer burdens, no longer symbols of conflict. What mattered most was the integrity I had preserved and the lessons I had learned about patience, courage, and faith in the truth.
Looking back, I see now that the journey was never just about money or a house. It was about understanding my own worth, learning to stand quietly but firmly for what I believed was right, and discovering that true strength often comes in silence. I realized that life's most valuable lessons do not arrive with noise or drama, but with calm reflection, careful observation, and the courage to act when the moment is right. I often think about my parents, about the life they gave me and the love they left behind. I am grateful for the lessons of compassion, patience, and quiet courage that they instilled in me. Even in their absence, their guidance shaped the choices I made, the battles I fought, and the calm I finally found. Sometimes, when I sit quietly in my apartment with a cup of tea, I allow myself to reflect on the journey. The fear, the betrayal, the long nights filled with uncertainty, and the quiet victories that came after. I smile softly because I understand now that life does not always give you control, but it does give you choices. How you respond, how you carry yourself, and how you preserve your integrity matters more than any fortune, any property, or any victory over someone else. I learned that trust, patience, and quiet strength can achieve more than anger or shouting ever could. I learned that being overlooked does not mean being powerless, and being underestimated can be the greatest advantage. Most importantly, I learned that life is not about revenge. Life is about truth, love, and the courage to continue even when the world seems to have turned against you. And so I continue. I live my life with the lessons I've learned, the love I carry, and the quiet strength that grows stronger every day. I walk forward without fear, with gratitude for the past and hope for the future. The storm has passed, and the calm that follows is mine to cherish. I finally understand that even after loss, betrayal, and heartbreak, life can be beautiful, life can be just, and life can be filled with quiet, enduring hope.